German front line, June 23, 1942. Eastern Front, approximately 80 kilometers north of Stalingrad. Temperature, 26 degrees Celsius during the day, dropping to 12 degrees at night. German infantry Corporal Hans Weber sits in his dugout. Around him, 50 men from the 297th Infantry Division. They've been on this position for 3 weeks, holding a strategic crossroads, waiting for orders to advance. The war is going well. Germany has conquered most of European Russia. The Wehrmacht advances toward the Volga River, toward Stalingrad, toward oil fields in the Caucasus. Victory seems inevitable. Weber's unit hasn't seen serious combat in weeks. Occasional Soviet probing attacks, artillery exchanges, nuisance raids, nothing significant. But for 3 weeks, Weber hasn't slept properly. None of them have. Because every night, around midnight, they come. The night witches. Weber remembers the first attack vividly. 3 weeks ago, clear night, full moon, perfect visibility. His platoon was dug in along a defensive line. Machine gun nests, mortar positions, supply depot, field kitchen. Standard defensive setup. 11 o'clock in the evening, Weber heard something strange, a sound he couldn't identify, like wind through fabric, like canvas tearing slowly, faint, distant, getting closer. He looked up, saw nothing. The sound continued, growing louder, but still nothing visible. Then, whoosh, something passed overhead, low, maybe 300 meters altitude, still nothing visible. Weber thought he imagined it. Fatigue, stress. The Eastern Front does strange things to men's minds. Then, explosion. The field kitchen, 200 meters behind the front line, erupted in flames. Direct hit. 2 bombs. The kitchen and everyone near it destroyed instantly. Chaos. Soldiers running. Officers shouting orders. Searchlights sweeping the sky. Machine guns firing blindly upward. But nothing there. Just darkness. Weber stood in his trench, scanning the sky. Where did the attack come from? Soviet bombers operate during the day, escorted by fighters, attacking from high altitude, thousands of meters up. But this attack came from low altitude. No engine sound, no warning, just that strange fabric-tearing sound. Then bombs, then nothing. The second night, the next night, it happened again. This time at 01:30 hours, half past midnight. Weber was on watch, exhausted but alert. Listening. The sound returned. That eerie whooshing, fabric tearing. Wind through canvas. Weber immediately shouted, "Aircraft! Incoming!" Searchlights stabbed into the sky. Machine guns traversed, searching for targets. And then Weber saw it. A biplane. Small. Fabric-covered wings. Flying perhaps 400 meters altitude. Slow. Maybe 120 kilometers per hour. Ancient-looking. The kind of aircraft Weber remembered seeing in museums before the war. But it was real, and it was directly above them. The biplane seemed to drift. No engine sound, just gliding silently. Impossible to track because it was so slow. German anti-aircraft weapons were designed for fast modern aircraft. This slow, low-flying biplane confused everyone. Bombs fell. The ammunition depot exploded. Secondary explosions for minutes. Thousands of rounds of ammunition cooking off. Flares launching randomly into the sky. Total chaos. By the time the searchlights relocated the biplane, it was gone. Engine sound resumed, a faint puttering, as the aircraft retreated into darkness. Weber and his comrades stood in shocked silence. What was that? Discovering the truth. The next morning, Weber's lieutenant gathered the platoon. He'd been at regimental headquarters receiving intelligence briefing. "The aircraft attacking us," the lieutenant said, "are Soviet Polikarpov Po-2 biplanes. Training aircraft, built in 1928. Maximum speed 150 kilometers per hour. wooden frame, fabric covering. Completely obsolete, the platoon exchanged glances. Obsolete biplanes were destroying their positions nightly. The lieutenant continued. The pilots are women. An all-female bomber regiment. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment. They fly multiple missions per night. Approach with engines running. Cut engines before reaching target. Glide silently. Drop bombs. Restart engines. Escape before we can respond. Silence. Then disbelief. Then anger. Women? In obsolete training aircraft? Attacking German infantry? It was absurd, insulting, infuriating, but also terrifying. Because every night for 3 weeks, these women in ancient aircraft were destroying German positions, and there was nothing the Wehrmacht could do about it. The psychological impact over the following weeks, the night attacks continued. Every night, sometimes multiple attacks per night. Different targets, supply depots, machine gun nests, artillery positions, command posts. The physical damage was significant, but not catastrophic. A Po-2 carried only 200 kilograms of bombs. Small payload compared to modern bombers, but the psychological damage was devastating. German soldiers couldn't sleep. Every night, lying in dugouts, listening for that fabric-tearing sound, knowing the attack was coming, but not knowing when or where. Some soldiers developed what we'd now call post-traumatic stress disorder, jumping at random sounds, unable to sleep even when exhausted. Paranoid, seeing threats everywhere. Weber wrote in his diary, recovered after the war from Soviet archives, June 28, 1942. 17th night of attacks. We call them Nachthexen, night witches. The name started as mockery. Women flying broomsticks, we joked. But now we use it with fear. They are witches. They appear from nowhere. Strike without warning, disappear into darkness. We fire thousands of rounds into the sky. Hit nothing. They are ghosts, demons, witches. The name stuck. Night witches. Die Nachthexen. German soldiers were being terrorized by women they couldn't see. Flying aircraft that shouldn't exist, using tactics nobody anticipated. And the worst part, everyone knew. Word spread through the entire German army. The night witches became infamous, feared, respected, hated. Being terrorized by women was humiliating. German military culture, steeped in traditional masculinity, couldn't process it. Women were supposed to be protected. Not attackers, not warriors, not terrifying, but these Soviet women were all three. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment. Who were these women terrorizing the German army? The 588th Night Bomber Regiment was established in October 1941, 5 months after Germany invaded the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was desperate. Millions of men killed or captured. Entire armies destroyed. Germany advancing rapidly toward Moscow. Stalin's regime needed every available person fighting. Including women, Soviet ideology officially promoted gender equality. Women and men as equal comrades building socialism. In practice, Soviet society was deeply patriarchal. Women did traditional roles, cooking, nursing, factory work. But war changes everything. Marina Raskova, Soviet Union's most famous female pilot, lobbied Stalin personally. Form female combat aviation units. Prove women can fight. Stalin, desperate for any advantage, agreed. 3 female aviation regiments authorized the all-female. Pilots, navigators, mechanics, armorers, ground crew, commanders. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment became the most famous. The Night Witches. The Polikarpov Po-2, the aircraft they flew, was laughably obsolete. The Polikarpov Po-2, originally U-2, renamed after designer Nikolai Polikarpov, died. First flew in 1928, designed as a primary training aircraft, teaching student pilots basic flying skills. Specifications. Crew, 2. Pilot in front cockpit. Navigator, bombardier in rear cockpit. Length, 8.17 meters. Wingspan, 11.4 meters. Empty weight, 635 kilograms. Maximum speed, 152 kilometers per hour. Service ceiling, 3,000 meters. Altitude, range, 630 kilometers. Armament, none. Later modified with one 7.62 mm machine gun in rear cockpit. Bomb. Load 200 kilograms maximum. Usually 100 to 150 kilograms actual load. The fuselage was plywood. The wings were fabric stretched over wooden frames. The entire aircraft could be damaged by rifle fire. One incendiary bullet could ignite the fabric wings. By 1941, the Po-2 was obsolete for any combat role. But the Soviet Air Force had thousands. Built since 1928. Used for training, for crop dusting, for liaison flights, for anything requiring a cheap, simple aircraft. When the 588th Regiment formed, the Po-2 was the only aircraft available. Modern bombers went to male regiments. The women got trainers. But these women turned obsolescence into advantage. The night. Witches developed tactics perfectly suited to their obsolete aircraft. Standard Soviet bomber doctrine. High-altitude bombing. Daylight raids. Fighter escort. Hit military and industrial targets with large payloads. But the Po-2 couldn't do any of that. Too slow for daylight raids. German fighters would massacre them. Too low service ceiling. Couldn't climb high enough to avoid anti-aircraft fire. Too small payload. Couldn't destroy major targets. So the night witches developed something completely different. Low-altitude night harassment bombing. The tactic. 1. Fly only at night. Darkness protects slow aircraft from fighters. 2. Fly very low. 400–800 meters altitude. Below most anti-aircraft weapons' optimal range. Too low for radar detection. 3. Approach target with engine running normally. Germans hear aircraft coming but can't see it in darkness. 4. Approximately 1 kilometer from target. Cut engine. The Po-2 glides silently. Maximum glide distance, 800 meters from 400 meters altitude. 5. While gliding silently, navigator releases bombs manually. Simple bomb sight, mostly aiming by eye and experience. 6. After bombs release, restart engine. Climb quickly. Escape into darkness before German searchlights locate aircraft. 7. Return to base. Rearm. Refuel. Repeat. Each crew flew 10 to 18 missions per night, taking off, bombing, landing, rearming, and repeating until dawn. The Po-2's obsolescence became its strength. So slow that German anti-aircraft guns, designed to track fast modern aircraft, couldn't aim accurately. The guns traversed too quickly, overshot the slow-moving target. German night fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-110s and Junkers Ju-88s were too fast. Their stall speed was higher than the Po-2's maximum speed. They literally couldn't fly slow enough to engage without stalling and crashing. By the time lights located the aircraft, it had already bombed and escaped. The silent gliding approach was psychologically devastating. German soldiers heard nothing, saw nothing. Then explosions. Then the faint sound of an engine restarting kilometers away. Ghosts. Demons. Witches. The women who were these women? Most were young, late teens to mid-20s. Many were university students. Aviation clubs were popular in Soviet universities. Some were mechanics. Some were teachers. Some were factory workers. All volunteered. Nobody was drafted into combat aviation. These women chose to fight. Training was brutal. Male instructors who resented female pilots. inadequate equipment, constant skepticism, accusations of weakness, questions about their resolve. But they persevered, learned to fly, learned to navigate, learned to bomb, and then they were sent to war. The living conditions were horrific. The 588th Regiment operated from primitive airfields, dirt runways, tents for shelter, no proper facilities, freezing winters, scorching summers. The Po-2 had open cockpits, no heating, no pressurization. At 400 meters altitude on a January night, temperatures could drop to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The women flew in multiple layers of clothing, fur-lined flight suits, but still froze. The aircraft had no radios. Communication between pilot and navigator was through a speaking tube, literally a tube connecting the two cockpits, shouting over engine noise. Navigation was entirely by visual landmarks and dead reckoning. No instruments, no guidance systems, just maps, compass, and the navigator's skill at recognizing terrain features in darkness. The bomb release mechanism was manual. Navigator pulled a lever. Bombs fell. No sophisticated targeting systems. Everything about the operation was primitive, dangerous, exhausting. But these women flew anyway, night after night, mission after mission. The famous pilots, some night witches, became legendary. Nadezhda Popova. 852 missions flown, more than any other pilot in the regiment. Survived the entire war. Earned Hero of the Soviet Union. Yevgenia Rudneva, navigator, astronomer before the war. Flew 645 missions. Killed in April 1944 when her aircraft was shot down during a mission near Kerch. Irina Sibrova, 1,008 missions. Most missions flown by any female pilot in World War II. Survived the war. Yevdokia Bershanskaya, regiment commander. Led the 588th from formation in 1941 until war's end. Only woman to command a regiment throughout the entire war. These were not exceptions. The entire regiment performed at extraordinary levels. 23 pilots earned Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest Soviet military honor. For comparison, most male bomber pilots flew 100 to 200 missions during the entire war. Night witches flew 800 1,000 missions. They flew more missions because each mission was short, maybe 30 to 40 minutes. Land, rearm, take off again. Repeat all night, but the cumulative risk was enormous. Every mission, risk of being shot down, risk of accidents. The Po-2 was fragile and prone to crashes. Risk of navigation error leading to flying into mountains or crashing in darkness. 30 of the night witches were killed during the war. Not a high casualty rate compared to male units, testament to their tactics and skill, but 30 women dead. 30 pilots who volunteered to fight for their country. Heroes, warriors, night witches. German frustration, back to Corporal Hans Weber and his comrades. Summer turns to autumn, autumn to winter. The night witches continue their attacks. German command issues orders, stop the night bombers. Commanders assign units specifically to counter the Po-2 raids. Anti-aircraft batteries redeployed. Orders, fire at any aircraft sound at night. Searchlight batteries repositioned. Orders, locate and illuminate slow-moving aircraft. Night fighters deployed. Orders, shoot down the biplanes. None of it works. Anti-aircraft guns fire thousands of rounds nightly. Hit nothing. The Po-2 flies too low and too slow. Guns can't track effectively. Searchlights sweep the sky constantly. Occasionally illuminate a Po-2 for seconds, but by the time guns aim, the aircraft has dropped bombs and disappeared. Night fighters patrol constantly, but they can't catch the Po-2. Too slow. German fighters stall at speeds faster than the Po-2's maximum velocity. Several German night fighters crashed trying to slow down enough to engage. Pilots killed attempting to shoot down obsolete biplanes. The frustration is overwhelming. Germany possesses the most advanced military in history. Modern tanks, artillery, aircraft. Yet they cannot stop women in training aircraft from 1928. The prestige issue. The situation becomes a matter of German military pride. Being attacked by women is humiliating. Being unable to stop women flying obsolete aircraft is unacceptable. Some German units offer Iron Cross decorations to any pilot who shoots down a night witch. Evidence: several German fighter pilots' records mention this bounty, but very few succeed. Shooting down a Po-2 at night, flying at treetop altitude with the element of surprise, is nearly impossible. When Germans do occasionally shoot down a night witch, it's usually through lucky machine gun fire from the ground, hitting the fragile aircraft by chance rather than aimed fire. Each loss is a small victory for Germans, but it doesn't stop the attacks. The next night, more Po-2s return, more bombs fall, more German soldiers lose sleep. Weber's Diary, October. 1942. Weber's diary entries from October 1942 reveal the psychological toll. October 3rd, 61st night of attacks. We are exhausted. Nobody sleeps. We stand watch all night, every night, firing at sounds, at nothing. The witches come anyway. Last night they hit our mortar position. 3 men dead. The night before, the supply depot. Our rations burned. We're hungry and terrified, and there's nothing we can do. I hate them, but I also respect them. They are braver than many German soldiers I've known, flying those flimsy aircraft into our fire, night after night. They must know they could die at any moment. Yet they come anyway. Some men say it proves women are crazy, suicidal, but I think it proves women can be warriors. Maybe better warriors than men, because they prove courage differently, not through strength, but through persistence. I don't know anymore. I just want the attacks to stop. I want to sleep. I want to go home. This diary entry was captured by Soviet forces in January 1943 during the Battle of Stalingrad. Weber himself was killed in February 1943. Whether by night witches or conventional Soviet forces, the records don't specify. But his diary survived, preserved in Soviet archives, published in the 1970s as part of a historical collection. His words reveal something important. Even enemies can recognize courage, even through hatred and fear. Soldiers understand what other soldiers endure. The strategic impact. The night witches' strategic impact was disproportionate to their small size and limited firepower. Direct military damage. Modest. 23,000 missions dropped approximately 3,000 tons of bombs. For comparison, a single Allied raid on Hamburg in 1943 dropped 9,000 tons. But the psychological and logistical impact was massive. German units targeted by night witches suffered chronic sleep deprivation. Exhausted soldiers make mistakes. Slow reaction times. Poor decision-making. Friendly fire incidents increase. German anti-aircraft resources were diverted. Units spent resources, ammunition, and personnel trying to counter the Po-2, resources that could have been used against conventional Soviet bombers or ground forces. German morale suffered. Being terrorized by women in obsolete aircraft was humiliating. Some German units requested transfers away from sectors targeted by night witches. Commanders couldn't publicly acknowledge this. Too shameful. Soviet morale soared. The night witches became propaganda heroes, proof that Soviet women were fighting, that obsolete equipment could still be effective, that creativity could overcome technological disadvantage. The night witches were force multipliers. Their actual destructive capability was small, but their impact on German psychology and Soviet morale was enormous. Unconventional warfare at its finest, using weakness, obsolete aircraft, female pilots, nighttime operations as strength. The war's end. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment fought from October 1941 until May 1945, the entire duration of the German-Soviet War. They fought at Stalingrad, at Kursk, in Ukraine, in Crimea, in Belarus, in Poland, finally, in Germany itself. By war's end, total missions flown, 23,672. Total bombs dropped, 3,000 tons. Pilots awarded Hero of the Soviet Union, 23. Pilots killed, 30. They were the most decorated female unit in Soviet military history, possibly in any military history. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the Night Witches were in Berlin. The pilots wanted to bomb the Reichstag, the German parliament building, a symbolic final mission. But by the time they arrived, Berlin had already fallen. The war was over. The women returned to the Soviet Union as heroes, parades, medals, recognition. But post-war Soviet society was deeply uncomfortable with female combat veterans. Women were encouraged to return to traditional roles: marriage, children, quiet domestic life. Many Night Witches struggled with this transition. They'd been warriors, pilots, heroes. Suddenly, they were expected to become housewives and mothers. The cognitive dissonance was profound. Some adapted, married, raised families, rarely spoke of the war. Others couldn't adjust, drank heavily, suffered from what we'd now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder. Some committed suicide. The Night Witches' story was buried for decades. Soviet propaganda preferred male heroes. Female warriors were awkward, didn't fit the narrative. Not until the 1980s, 40 years after the war, did the Night Witches receive proper recognition. Books, documentaries, memorials. The lesson. What do we learn from the Night Witches? First, necessity breeds innovation. The women were given obsolete aircraft because modern bombers went to men. But they turned that limitation into advantage. Used the Po-2's weaknesses, slow speed, low altitude, primitive equipment, as tactical strengths. Second, psychological warfare matters. The Night Witches inflicted modest physical damage, but they devastated German morale. Terror is a weapon. Sleep deprivation is a weapon. Humiliation is a weapon. Third, courage transcends gender. These women flew into enemy fire night after night. More missions than most male pilots. Proved definitively that women can fight, can endure, can win. Fourth, conventional thinking loses to unconventional tactics. Germany had superior technology, modern fighters, advanced anti-aircraft systems, but couldn't counter women in wooden biplanes because the tactics were completely unexpected. The Night Witches exemplify asymmetric warfare. When you're weaker, you don't fight conventionally. You fight smart. Use what your enemy doesn't expect. Attack where they're vulnerable. Germany expected modern bombers at high altitude during daytime, so the Night Witches attacked at low altitude during nighttime with obsolete aircraft. Germany expected male pilots, so the Soviets sent women. Germany expected predictable tactics, so the Night Witches glided silently and attacked from darkness. Every expectation violated, every assumption shattered, and Germany couldn't adapt, because adapting would require admitting that women in training aircraft were legitimate threats. Too humiliating. too contradictory to Nazi ideology about gender and racial superiority. So German soldiers suffered, terrorized nightly by enemies they couldn't see, couldn't hit, couldn't stop. The Night Witches won not through superior firepower, but through superior psychology. Final reflection. Today, the Night Witches are remembered differently by different people. In Russia, heroes, symbols of Soviet courage and female empowerment. Veterans honored at Victory Day parades. In Germany, a footnote, an embarrassing episode. German military historians prefer focusing on conventional battles. Being terrorized by women in obsolete biplanes doesn't fit the narrative of Wehrmacht competence. In the West, inspirational story. Proof that women can fight, used in debates about women in combat roles. But perhaps the most important legacy is this. The Night Witches proved that war is not just about technology or firepower. It's about psychology, creativity. Will Germany had better aircraft, better weapons, better technology. But the Night Witches had better tactics, better psychological understanding, better will to fight. And in the end, the women in wooden biplanes helped defeat the most powerful military machine in the world. Not through strength, through cleverness. Not through firepower. Through fear. Not through following rules. Through breaking them. The Night Witches. Proof that limitations can become strengths. That weakness can become power. That obsolete technology in brilliant hands defeats modern technology in conventional minds. German soldiers were right to fear them. The Night Witches were terrifying, not because of what they were, but because of what they represented. The future of warfare, unconventional, psychological, unstoppable.